The future of television is now, I suppose it should be subtitled, is linear TV doomed? We will discuss. We've got a great panel lined up here to address some of those issues for you. It's also sponsored, may I say, first of all, by Ernst & Young. So those of you fretting that this session is standing between you and the drinks, never fear, because they're sponsoring the drinks, the McTaggart Lecture drinks, this very team. So we're in the right place, and it's just next door, and we led there by Sharon Stotts, who I'll introduce first of all, the director of Ernst & Young, who's produced the report that's going to be the bedrock, I suppose, of this session. Let me introduce the other panellists, and I'll start at the far end there. We've got Lee Bartlett there, the president of Discovery Studios and the production group, the hot breath on their backs. Ben McCohen-Wilson from YouTube, director of content partnerships there. The minister, very, very pleased to have you here. Ed Vaizey, thank you very much indeed for coming along, Minister of State, at the departure, DCMS, let's just say it that way. And then, of course, last but not least, Mark Browning, Managing Director of ITN Productions. So welcome to you all. Thank you very much indeed. And as you know, this session, although it's about new technology, is going to be interactive, but we're going to do it verbally. We haven't got the app thing working. So towards the end, we're going to build in plenty of time, because I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions. You can send them by pigeon, cleft stick, or any method you like on one of those shop things that they used to have. No, just stick your hand up and we can all hear you. It'll be great. It'll work better that way. So look, let's start with the minister, because you know a lot of the technology side lands with you. But give me the overview. If linear TV is dying, and it is, it's not going to exist in its present form anywhere at some point in the future, that must be a concern for the government, even if it's just about the amount of money that our production sector earns in exports.
Well, let me start by saying that my name is Ed Vaizey, but I like being called the Minister. So,
OK, we'll just call you Ed then.
I do have a name in the real world, but Minister is fine for the rest of this session and afterwards in the networking, or the Minister, actually, I like a lot. I think, to a certain extent, the way I always characterise this debate, and I may be wrong because I'm sort of middle-aged and set in my ways now, but I think the future of TV is here, but it's not here yet. So all the stats do show that linear TV is still surviving. And although the lady in the VT talking about, as it were, the water cooler moment, the family moment, it still survives with some of the big ticket programmes like X Factor and so on. And in fact, a lot of those programmes are enhanced by technology, because one of the reasons you want to watch X Factor when it's on is because you want to be following it simultaneously on Twitter, and you don't get that fun if you're going to watch it the next morning on catch-up or whatever. So I think there's a lot of life left in linear television. I also think the challenge for government, to an extent, is to intervene when necessary, and there is an element of stepping back, because nobody really does know what is going to happen in the future. Nobody can predict it. So we can. So, for example, some of the issues we look at are things like the electronic programme guide for public service broadcasters and so on, to maintain their sort of front of house, intervening in terms of TV tax credits and so on to support investment.
Well, we'll talk about the £1 million limit there. You know, we had that.
At the moment, a kind of top-down regulatory framework for the new era doesn't seem to me to be possible, because we're still feeling.
Well, I'll move on from calling you Minister to calling you Ed. But what about Digital Britain? I mean, you know, we heard a lot about that in 2010 when you came into power. I mean, and the Prime Minister's sitting there in Cornwall trying to run the country, he tells us, and he has to go to the top of a hill to get a mobile phone signal.
Yes.
Yes.
That is
so
true.
What happened to that then?
Digital Britain, in terms of infrastructure and building the digital pipes, as it were, is alive and well. So we've got a programme for broadband. We're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on that.
Are you really?
We are. We passed 1 million homes last week under this initiative. We've got the best broadband compared to any major country in Europe. Something like 78 or 80% of the country now has super fast broadband. We've got 4G rolling out. We've got the fastest rollout of 4G and take-up of 4G anywhere in the world. So it's going well.
OK, well, I wonder if everyone in this room agrees with that. But I just want people to lay out their stalls. And Ben, I describe you as the hot breath on the linear broadcaster's back. Well, you're more than that, aren't you? You're killing them. YouTube.
I don't think that we're killing them. I think probably 3 years ago, most of the broadcasters, not just in the UK, but actually across Europe, where I work, probably thought that YouTube was the devil incarnate and that we were about to kill them. I think that relationship has shifted dramatically. We've got broadcasters both here and in the US and across Europe who are working with us. They're uploading stuff ahead of schedule. They're using the platform to get the fans of their shows to share clips, engage with clips, and engage with the shows on air. So I think the relationship has gone from one of probably relatively ill-informed fear to one of pretty active participation, often driven by the independent producers and by other creators online who've said, hold on, we want our show to be on YouTube. We want it to be available beyond the UK.
Well, we'll talk more about that collaboration and particularly in the monetary sense as well a little bit later on, but you're all just laying out your stalls now. And Lee, I want to talk about Discovery. I mean, it wasn't so long ago, it seems to me, that Discovery was the shiny newcomer, or one of the shiny newcomers around. Do you feel a bit long in the tooth now?
I think I feel exactly the opposite, because if you look at the viewing numbers both in the UK and globally, our audience share tends to be increasing. A lot of that may be at the expense of the PSVs, but it gets back to what's the content. And quite frankly, we don't care how it's consumed, just that it's consumed. So we can hit an audience of 600-700 million people because we have networks in 170 countries, and there's 16 networks in one country and 10 in another. So I think we should be very careful in predicting the demise of linear television, because they predicted the demise of film when first picked the radio was going to kill film, and then television was going to... Doesn't work? Okay. Television was going to kill film, and nothing killed film. And on linear television, we're not all 18 to 24. And when you're 60 years old, you may not wish to do anything other than sit on your couch and watch television. But I think second and more importantly...
So is linear TV just for old people then?
No, it's not for old people. I mean, we put a show on called Wallenda Live, which was Nick Wallenda crossing the Grand Canyon. And we attracted an audience of 30 to 40 million people on a global basis watching it live, even when people got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. The point to me is there's the assumption that linear television remains static, that it doesn't change its composition, that it doesn't learn how to adapt to the changing technology and using it. I mean, I look at him as my friend. I can put clips up there to advertise my shows that are coming up. So I just think we should be kind of careful in assuming a trend that doesn't change.
I mean, I know you want to come back on that, Ben, but I just want to bring Mark in here as an Indian. It was one of the comments made in that opening film there. I mean, are you making content now with online more in mind, totally in mind? Or do you just cut your cloth accordingly?
Well, it's driven by the channels and the commissioners. And for me, the future of a good indie in television is that it's, in a business sense, it's got a diverse business base. Any indie that's going to survive has to now be able to produce content in a very diverse way, have a number of business strands to it, not relying on an individual genre or channel as its key source, because competition will only increase. And in a content world, I think from the output of those indies, the successful indies of the future have to be able to make content for any platform at any time using any device. If they can't specialize in that way, then they will be taken over.
But I'm interested, I mean, are you kind of ahead of the commissioners? Are you telling them, look, this will work online, this will work, the clips will work on YouTube, you can put these bits on the tablet? Are the commissioners asking for that, or are you telling them?
The commissioners aren't asking for enough in factual entertainment. I would use an illustration. In our business, we've diversified so that we now make TV commercials as part of a portfolio of production. We make broadcast television, sports, digital, TV commercials. There's no brand or client that would ever commission a TV commercial, a piece of television, a commission using TV language, without a full activation of their story. They would have outdoor, they would have press, they would have online, they would have digital experiences, they would have Facebook campaigns, because that's how they talk to their audience. But yet in TV commissioning world, we still, certainly in Factual and Fact Ent, we commission a TV show and we pitch all the time. Here's the TV show, here's the activation, here's the Gen Y content, here's the Facebook campaign. they take the TV.
Okay, I want to bring Sharon in here. And that report, by the way, if you haven't already read it, The Future of Television in the UK, it's in the delegate bags, isn't it? Everyone can either read it now, read it later, or has read it. I mean, just the broad brush there, Sharon, to start with. I mean, is there a looming cliff, and quite a lot of these people here are lemmings?
Well...
Well, not you, Ed. No. And he's not, but are these two. And some of them. Have we got any lemmings? No, tell me, is there... I mean, but you are saying...
Well, I mean, what we are saying is let's set a bit of context around the landscape. So, as Ed, if I may, said, the UK creative industry is fantastic to this country, and the creative industry brings £7 billion. It brings 1.7 million jobs, which is awesome. We've seen exports go up, which is amazing, of UK programming. If we look at China, we've seen an increase of 90% between 2011 and 2012. We have some amazing brands, and that's fantastic. You know, we can all reel them off: Strictly, Come Dine With Me, Sherlock, etc. What we're finding in our report is that actually there are a number of forces that are already taking place and have already played a big role in the way some of these organizations up here have had to change. And those forces are around technology, personalization, demographics, and that's just to name a few, not to mention devices. So we are seeing these trends out there. We're seeing a world that is changing. And I think, you know, very aptly, as with the title of the report, is, are you going to act or react? So, you know, we will determine who the lemmings are by their strategy of whether they're going to act.
They're the ones that react too late.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the actions, the recommendations as we get towards the end. Right. Okay. Let's flesh this out now. We've already talked about it, content and audiences, and I want to pick up on that Lee point and Ben to respond on that. You're friends, really?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways that we can be. We happen to be really friends, but apart from that...
Are you real friends or not real friends?
We are real friends.
You are real friends. In real life.
In real
bosom
life.
buddies.
And, but I think there's kind of three ways that broadcasters are taking advantage of. The changes in technology is kind of one thing. I think what they have begun to unlock and enable is an ability as a broadcaster or a producer to turn somebody who was just an audience that maybe you learned something about when the overnights came in, like how many of them were, and vaguely what audiences, what demos they were, into a real fan base. And those fans have always been there for the great content that the people in this room make and the broadcasters here transmit. But the technology today allows you to have that relationship with them long before the show comes to air, because the people who are fans of X Factor are excited about the show long before it comes to air. It allows you to engage in a conversation with them between the time that it's broadcast, and allows you to go on and extend that conversation with them long after it's broadcast. I think so. That's the one way, first of all, that you can really take advantage of it. I think the second way is that you can just allow the fans to unlock the passion they've got for your shows, which includes on our platform them sharing clips from your programs, not full-length versions, but clips from your programs. 3 years ago, there weren't many broadcasters in the world doing that. Today, we're working with most of the broadcasters, certainly here in the UK, looking at them claiming those clips from their shows, so the broadcasters control what length, where they're shown. And the reason to do that is because when most of us on this panel were kids growing up and we saw a great TV show, the broadcaster did not run into the schoolyard and tell us all to stop talking about it. Well, you know what? Today, when the kids want to talk about your show and share their passion for their show, they will do it with clips from that show. They will tweet it. They will share it with their friends on Facebook. They will post it on YouTube. And that is just that. We don't try and put that back in a box.
But it's just part of the cliff. I mean, you know, what you're effectively talking about is a marketing tool. What a fantastic marketing tool. You know, but these shows, whatever they are, but that's why you're friends at the moment. But they cost a lot of money to make, don't they, some of these shows? And, you know, if you're not getting money from it, at some point, that virtuous circle has to be broken. You get audiences, you get money back, you get advertisers, and that's the problem. I mean, I just want to bring Lee back in on that. That's why you're friends at the moment, because you get the word out, but you get the money from somewhere else. You don't get much from YouTube.
That's his problem.
Is it his problem? No, it's great. They get it free.
Money. No, but I mean, you have a variety. Except for YouTube, a lot of the other over-the-top services, they are showing the content that we're creating, and they're showing it in a full-length version. So as long as he's showing clips of my content, that's good for me. When I understand the point when someone watches YouTube in lieu of broadcast television or long-form television, that's another issue. But maybe in the past, and I'm just speculating here, maybe in the past they read a book, they went outside and played. You know, you never captured on linear television 100% of the audience. And I don't think that, at least as it's configured now, YouTube, you know, is very interesting to me. Netflix or somebody like that is a different story. But even on Netflix, they're playing my programming. Obviously not all of it. So I think looking at this stuff as opportunities for people to know your brand better, and that, for me, for linear television, with all of the choices that you have, if you have a brand, people will follow that brand, regardless of the platform. So people know who Discovery is, and they know what it is. They know who it is globally. A lot of them know TLC because that's another global network that we have. So our idea is get our brand out there, support it by good programming, use YouTube or anybody else that we can find who is willing to take clips and help promote the show. I think that those are complementary relationships now.
But on that issue of monetizing it all, Mark, come in on this, because we all know budgets are being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and ultimately things have moved on. And it wasn't that very long ago that Mark Thompson was talking about the jacuzzi of cash at the BBC and things like that. Yeah, you lit up there, Ed Vasey. But you know, those days are long gone, and this is partially what's causing it.
Partially, but it would be, I think it's a mistake to just see the digital side as the marketing for the show. Okay. Because there are the complexities of the audience fragmentation. If you take the Gen Ys, the so-called millennials, for them, TV any content is about having a conversation with the brand or with the broadcaster or with the show. They need an authentic conversation, they need a real-time conversation, they need a multi-way conversation rather than a TV to them. So the future has to be about engaging in that generation in a digital way, not just a clip on YouTube that teases a future show, but that pulls an audience in, pulls a new audience in, that won't ultimately probably even watch the output on the biggest form of platform, the box. They'll then watch it on demand. But you're building an audience, you're building better ROI ultimately for your investment because you're having a conversation, a multi-way dialogue with them and building real engagement further and deeper than TV has done in the past.
Okay, and Sharon, does that have to change? I mean, with that audience power, does that mean content has to change and adapt more rapidly? Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think there's a great analogy of, is the audience now actually the puppeteer? So rather than the other way around, to Mark's point about the relationship being different, I think audiences want to know that their voice is being heard. I think they want to engage, and we've seen this on a spectrum from tweeting to actually crowdfunding. So you can see people actually wanting to play a more active role than they ever have in the past. And I think there is something about missing that opportunity if you're not able to capitalize on that, actually understand the analytics behind what your audience wants, what's going to drive them to multiple screens and platforms.
Okay, but I'm thinking, how do you make money out of them? How do you make them watch ads or pay for the content?
Well, you do it by understanding their behaviors, but also looking at secondary and primary views of revenue streams. So we all know that people are looking for making the money, but additional revenue streams are what we're all looking for. You know, what's going to be the next big brand lead for you? That could be through the development cycle, understanding who's the audience, what are they going to be willing to pay for? Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that we heard it from that young man in the clip there, didn't we, Ed Vasey? You know, we see with our own children, you know, they exactly the point he made. They've no idea who made what. It's a good program. They might watch a clip of it. They don't know Channel 4 from BBC 2 from E4 or whatever else they're watching. But you know, the thought occurs, Minister, that you know, these similar problems facing so many of our creative industries in different forms, but you know, one thinks obviously about the publishing industry, the music industry, all huge industries, particularly for the United Kingdom, and they're all facing similar problems about the rise and risen online, but how do they actually monetize now? The audiences are still there, and put it back into new talent.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, obviously we've been through a massive period of transition. So again, if you come back to where kind of government can intervene and the development of YouTube, if you like, I think YouTube has become a much more serious commercial partner of a lot of the UK creative industries and creative industries around the world. But when I first came into this job, and I've been doing it both in opposition and in government for a very long time, YouTube was a bogeyman, if you like, because of intellectual property infringement. So on the one hand, government has a role to ensure IP enforcement, and there, a lot of pirate sites are now blocked, and we work with advertisers, we work with credit card companies and so on. But at the same time, a lot of the big internet companies now, I think, have grown up, if I can put it in that way, if that's not too pejorative, and are now working with the content creators. So it's very important that people protect their intellectual property. There's no reason why they shouldn't make money from their intellectual property just because it's online as opposed to it being linear. So that's an important way to monetize. But there are, as Sharon said, lots of other strings, secondary and primary markets and so on. Data is obviously the big new debate about each content creators now find themselves in a world where they want to hold on to their data and use their data as a way of making money as well by really understanding their audiences. There are other ways that haven't really taken off. Product placement was there was a big row about it in 2010. The last government was bringing it in at the end of their term in office. We supported them on that. Hasn't really taken off in the UK. Hasn't really been a big source of income. I'm sure there are other things that people might think about.
I mean, it's a brilliant point you make about data. I mean, I was just talking in another session. I mean, it's hardly believable that in the second decade of the 21st century, we still rely on Barb figures for shows still live and die by it. Advertisers base their spend on it. I mean, Lee, do you think? I mean, there are better ways, of course there are, but do you think, particularly the advertisers can be taught to trust them?
I think it's very imperfect. You have Barb in the UK and you have Nielsen in the US, and neither of them actually have any competition. So lacking the competition, there is no push to refine the data or to get better information. And for me, we look at the audience figures, and that tells you kind of like overnight whether your show is a quote a hit or not a hit. But if we relied on that to decide what shows to put on the air or whether to continue them, we would be, like blind people.
Well, so, I was going to ask Sharon about. I mean, you're basically flying in the dark here, whistling in the dark. Well, I mean, how can that be addressed with that advertiser distrust of any other form?
I mean, we have other measurement tools that we use.
Yeah, but to the advertiser, you take it to the advertiser. What do they say?
Well, it kind of depends. They can generally tell by the number of people watching, particularly in the cable space, which is, your pricing is different than it is in broadcast television. So if they see that your average slot viewing is 1 million, and you've got 2, then they know at least that people are watching the program more than normal, and that would be a statistic that I would use to go and sell to the media agencies. And there's a big difference, I think, between call it cable or whatever you want to call it, and the reliance by advertisers on the Nielsen or the Barb data than there is on broadcast.
Yeah,
I think we're luckier.
Sorry, Sharon, you want to come in?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that just flags up the fact that in the kind of ecosystem or where everybody is playing, everyone has different roles. And I think with the forces like technology and demographics changing and access to data, people's roles need to be changed dramatically. The role of the advertiser needs to change dramatically, for example. The roles that your partners take with you need to change. So whilst you might be friends, you may be BFFs today and something else in a few months. But we all know that the technology and the changes that are amongst us are actually going to dictate in many ways how those relationships, roles, and actually revenues eventually play out.
Yeah.
I mean, the pie gets bigger, in which case everybody is happy.
Well, okay, but I mean, just on data, Ben, I mean, you must have loads of it. I mean, you know, particularly on, this is the holy grail for the television producers, for the advertisers on the 1834s and younger.
Yep. So we get, everybody who has a channel on YouTube gets all the analytics on their audiences, viewing in their channel, the demographic breakdown of those viewers, where they're geographically located, including in places like the US at a city level, so down to a...
So this is part of the partnership, but you give this information for free?
All free.
You tell them?
All free.
Is that true, Lee? Yeah, okay.
As I know. Ben would never lie.
Ben would never lie. And you know, we've now just released an app that lets you see that in real time on an iPhone or an Android phone, because again, for lots of our creators, it's part of what Mark was saying. It's in order to be able to have that conversation in real time with the fans of your show, you need to be knowing what are they watching, what are they sharing, what are they commenting on. You can see how far through a particular video they're viewing it. You can see which videos they're sharing, whether they're liking it, disliking it. That's data that we push out as much as possible.
Okay, right. Well, we've done data, and that's the audience side. Mark, the content side. I mean, you came from radio, right? You turned ITN Productions from something. I mean, I remember from being at ITN, it was kind of an add-on, a bit of a boutique. It's now a powerhouse, right? So, how's that been achieved? And I mean, you've got to run it. You've got to run it a very, very tight ship. Have you done that? And because I'm leading to this, there's stuff in the report about that, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about coming into a different sector is television's cost base is high. It's high compared to other sectors. And that is a real challenge in terms of trying to innovate. So you've got to be able to bring that cost base under control, and you've got to be able to innovate around compelling content. The thing about, I think, a successful indie and turning it from a moderate-sized company to a powerhouse or what have you, is to diversify in the type of content you make. In the same way that the role, we talked there about the roles of change. I mean, the role of the indie now is also to get the stuff seen, not just to make it. So you've got to have compelling content, you've got to have a wide production base. So we go from television, from dispatches and the agenda, right the way through to digital sport, TV commercials, corporate content. It's all content.
Yeah.
It's coming from the same core skills.
So, but I mean, do you have to go to commissioners and channel bosses and say, look, actually it did really, really well here online, it did well on the tablets. You're thinking about pulling it because your overnights came in and it was disappointing in the 8 p.m. slot or whatever it was.
There is a tension in there between, the idea that you just, in a digital sense, you just post and hope that this, you could do that 5 years ago. You put stuff up and people would watch it. You can't do that anymore. You've got to put stuff and then do stuff to make people watch it. And I think that's a competency the indie now has to have. If the indie's going to be really successful, extra capability, extra cost, you're going to charge your commissioner for that, because that's the right economy to say, look, commissioner, if you just commission this from us, you'll get this return on it. The commissioners, we've got our series on vets on BBC Two right now. It's on tonight.
Good plug. Yeah. Target time.
I still watch linear television.
Scheduled television. I think there's an interesting thing here. For me, linear television has a very bright future. Scheduled television, arguably not so. In fact, not so. But linear television, absolutely, because television still has a massive role in amplifying the conversation. But scheduled television, no way.
Well, is that part of it? Ed Vaser, you were saying it, and I've seen it, we've all seen it, those, particularly the shiny floor shows on the Saturday night. And I suppose, it's more on the X Factor side with, with my teenage children. They have to watch it. They're recording it as well, but they have to watch it live, or they can't have that conversation. That is the point, isn't it? There is still life in the old dog yet, Sharon.
There is life, but as Mark said, you're being squeezed as well to look at costs, right? So you can have life, but you're going to do more, and you're going to have to do it with less. So we have seen organizations actually look quite closely at production, for example, and different parts of the production life cycle to take out between 15 and 20% in savings that they then reinvest for content. So there is something there about challenging, back to the roles and what you're doing, to actually challenge areas in the business, and production used to be off limits, to say, well, is there something else we can do around innovation, around using data, the technology that can result in some of the savings we need?
Yeah.
I think there's an important point here where brands, agencies, broadcasters are taking production in-house increasingly, because they're saying, well, hang on a minute, it's a small margin business. Why do I even want to give that small margin to a third-party independent production house? Flip it around and go, the opportunity for the indie, well, that is a risk and a threat, is brands are becoming publishers, publishers are becoming broadcasters, broadcasters are becoming brands. New market opportunity. Brands now
You're telling your
broadcast.
competitors, Mark.
That's how
don't we thinking this.
So
man.
where a brand is now, Red Bull. Red Bull is an entertainment company, an entertainment brand. It has a product that's a drink. They need masses of content produced. Opportunity for the indies. While there's a risk over here that broadcasters may take production in-house, I think there's a fantastic opportunity because of this convergence of brands, publishers, broadcasters, all doing similar things.
Okay, I mean, you're very chipper about that, and I want to explore that a little bit more later on. But Ed Facey, just overall, I mean, government, I know, is listening. You are listening, and you are contributing here. But is there, for the future, are you thinking, well, perhaps we better go easy on these, on the big engines, right? You've got the BBC, you've got charter renewal, you've got license fee discussions to have. You've got on the commercial side, they've got all kind of public service remits, and you think, well, actually, they need the money to reinvest to keep making the content because they're not really monetizing it.
Well, I think we are going easy on the big engines. I mean, what struck me was that...
freezing the license fee?
Well, I don't think... well, I prefer to go easy on the, person who's paying the license fee under criminal penalty. So if we can keep the license fee low, I think that's a good thing. I don't know whether everyone agrees with me that the BBC could probably find ways of being more efficient within its current budget, or that a £3 to £4 billion guaranteed budget a year is quite a significant sum and takes you out of the running against a lot of commercial companies that have to, had to fight their way through the recession. So there's quite a lot going for the BBC that a freeze in the licence fee doesn't bring doom and gloom. But just on the other point about public service broadcasters and renewing their licences, for example, we were very open-minded about that, and we wanted to hear from them. And all of them were happy to have their PSB licences renewed for another 10 years with the same obligations, because they clearly felt that the obligation, the benefits of being a PSB outweighed the burdens, and that so-called burdens, as it were, and that in fact they could accommodate quite a lot of what you might call regulation and burdens. So I think they felt really what I feel as well, which is sort of where I started in this discussion, which is, yes, the future is happening on one level very, very fast. We can all predict certain things about, people watching content on the tablets, but actually linear television and to a certain extent scheduled television still remains very strong, as do the big broadcasters.
But the going easy a bit, I mean, did you address the point made in the opening film there about the £1 million, the level at which the tax breaks come in? It doesn't really help documentary makers and things like that.
Well, again, bringing in the tax credit for television and indeed for animation, don't forget, as well as video games, was designed to help content producers. And so I would point to the first half of that bloke's phrase, which is, it's a great thing for drama producers. It's not, it wasn't designed, excuse me, for documentary makers, but you can be certain, naming no names like Discovery, that people were through the door immediately, in fact, in the run-up to the introduction of the tax credit, to say, could you reduce the threshold of £1 million, because we would like to make documentaries with the tax credit. And other people have also lobbied. I think the tax credits have been extremely successful. They deliver. What is so great about them is they seem to deliver, I don't want to get too carried away here, but they seem to deliver instant success. And the minute you announce the tax credit, suddenly people are saying, right, we are moving a production to the UK, we are creating jobs. This is fantastic. So there is a real appetite in the Treasury to look at other ideas. So people shouldn't say that we've stopped our journey, but I can't make any promises. But certainly people should keep pushing for what, if they think additional effective tax credit.
And not on the topic at all. You want to see licence fee evasion decriminalised?
There's no secret that we're going to consult on licence fee decriminalisation. It is a big issue in Parliament, and there are quite a few MPs who think it is wrong that a criminal conviction should come from not paying the licence fee. But we are going to consult on it because it's a complicated matter and it's something we need to look at.
You feel it should be. You're one of them.
By definition, if I said what my view was before the consultation, it would Slightly
Yeah, this is for another
destroy
programme.
the consultation.
We'll discuss that on a Sunday morning and say off topic.
This will be on the Dermot and Ed YouTube politics channel.
Yeah, what's it called? I've done a bit of that, actually.
Yeah, we'll produce it for you if
Yeah.
you want to do it.
There's no money in it, but you
Great
get
Facebook campaign.
You'll get some audience data from YouTube for free. Sharon, I missed I wanted you to make the point as well about what Mark was saying there about, is there a similarity between kind of industrial production techniques and what's going on in television? This is a creative industry, for goodness sake.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Not turning out widgets.
It is, no, you're absolutely right. It is a creative industry, but I think in our experience, what we have seen are, by looking at innovative content creation and looking at different ways, especially around the development life cycle, you can actually cut down the development life cycle in the way that you engage with your audience. So if you imagine taking some of the data that Ben's given to you,
Right.
and then actually using more data to understand consumer behaviors, perhaps looking at experimenting with another new and innovative hit or an idea or story generation, you can actually think, that's just one example, of different parts in that production process where you could bring in efficiencies. Every other industry is doing it.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't quite get it.
Why do you think television isn't doing it? I mean, we do it, putting my production hat on instead of my broadcasting hat on. Just things like camera technology have changed so rapidly that you don't spend 10,000 pounds for a camera. Now you can get one that's got better quality for 1,000 pounds. We learn how to use the green screen. We learn how to do digital insertions of ads. We are constantly looking at the production process to figure out how you can, quite frankly, get better quality for less money. And that to me is, I mean, we don't just stand still.
No, I don't think you stand still. I think there are other things, however, that, along with the technologies, there's some terrific benefits. But there are certain things, like certain ways that, internal script meetings are run, and some of the even like basic ways of managing talent and capability, and actually the way you've resourced skills and preparing for the next generation of skills are sometimes holding it back.
Really, you've seen better practices in heavy industry, have you? Fewer meetings and being nice to talent. You're talking my kind of language here, Sharon. That's exactly what I want to hear. But Ben, it's interesting what Lee was saying there about the technology, because I guess, and I haven't done it, if you look back at some of the early YouTube content, you can see the evolution in production values, in the technology. What people were sticking up there. I don't know how old you are, 10 years, I guess, or a bit, 10 years ago, must look antediluvian.
Completely. So the first video on YouTube was actually one of the founders at the San Diego Zoo, and it's dreadful. The highlight is that these are elephants, they've got long trunks. I think that's about the highlight.
Is it still on YouTube?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Watch it tonight.
But today it's possible, that is one of the things that's happened, is this complete kind of democratization of the creation of good quality video content. And I think that does, that I've been kind of trying to be embracing everyone until now, but that creates a threat, because anybody can now begin to create, and if they've got a passion about a topic, they can find an audience, a global audience. We've got, there's a young girl who's from Wiltshire called Zoe Sugg, who's got 7.5 million subscribers to her YouTube channel. She uploads videos that are mostly about kind of fashion and beauty, but also around kind of reasonably kind of hard-hitting teen themes like anxiety, depression, bulimia, other things. And she'll get anything between 5 to 10 million views for each of her videos, and she'll upload 2 or 3 a week.
But that was always the great defence, Mark, wasn't it? Of saying, the television experience was that, and in a way, we mentioned cinema earlier on, and when VHS first came out, everyone said, well, that's going to be the death of cinema. But then people watched their grainy old VHSs and said, well, actually, you can't see much, so I will still go to the cinema. But the thing is now is that, and I don't want to bring the mood down, too much here, but we've noticed it in news from the awful incident 2 days ago that. Just on the quality of that awful propaganda video from IS compared to what their predecessors were releasing 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago when they did that kind of thing in Iraq. that was rubbish, and this is part of a propaganda campaign, but the access to technology. So it means then, in a way, that everybody can do it. And you touched on it, Mark, with, you know, and I'm just talking about obviously the making it look good side of things and edit it efficiently and making it sound good. Anyone can do it. You were talking about it with saying, well,
they can do it.
All kinds of organisations
But 10 years ago, I sat on a panel talking about the future of radio. Every industry is having the same conversation. So that threat is not new, and that threat will always be there. So what do you do about it? You have to make sure that you have a brand that says quality, because ultimately compelling quality will prevail over plethora. And you have to have a business base that's diversified enough to withstand that downward pressure or counter that downward pressure. That's the successful indie model, I think.
Okay, right. Well, listen, we're running out of time now. Really, I'm sure you've got lots of thoughts there, and we are going to bring them in a minute. But I just want to, you know, get Sharon to throw me 5 years ahead. Okay, with our linear or scheduled television broadcasters, what do they have to do to still be in a, let's say, in a fairly robust condition?
So there are probably 4 things that I would think spring to mind. One is around the whole idea around data and personalization, because I think those two definitely go together. So it is back to keeping the audience at the center and looking at how you're going to personalize that experience. How are you building that relationship? Because it's not just we are going to broadcast to you and you will live or die by whatever we give you. It is about engagement. The second one is it is constantly about efficiencies. I know it sounds really boring, but actually around efficiencies, it's if the drive for efficiency is to reinvest in content, then surely that's got to be a good thing. So doing things quicker, faster, that will make life easier and allow you to spend more time on getting that creative content, which is going to get audience
engagement. Could you do that in perpetuity, though? Isn't there a point at which you say, well, we're as efficient, we're running as lean as we can?
No, actually. No.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Good. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's an indie. You know.
Well, you can't, and that's, I mean, there's a whole school of thought around it, but you can't just stay still and you can't say, we've achieved that efficiency, because the grass does grow back.
Okay. Well, sorry I interrupted you. You've got a couple more points to make, and then we'll throw it open to the audience.
I'd probably just end with the last point, which is around relationships and partnerships. So I do think with people's roles changing, there's something about how are you going to be prepared as an organization to be adaptable to change that role. So where you might be a producer and maybe your role is going to change and you're going to be working with the advertisers, or you're going to take a different role, or multiple roles, which could actually affect your business model, your people, your capabilities.
Okay, let's throw it open. I mean, we've got, I can see everyone. I don't think we've got microphones anyway. We did have in the last session, I did. Oh, we do? Oh, yeah, great. Well, if we need them, I'm not sure we will. If you stand up, introduce yourself and put your point. It can be either on the multifarious topics we've been discussing right here, or just a new thought. So we've got a gentleman in the third row to kick us off.
Thank you. I'm Martin Stott. I work at Channel 5. I just wanted to bring you up on one point, because I think it's always interesting to come to Edinburgh, hear what people are saying about how the current state of television, how it's going to change. I think we've got to remember that, when we think about that, we need to think about what evidence is available. And I think I've gone to lots of conferences where well-paid media executives have said, don't worry about what Barb says, what the figures are, because I've got a focus group consisting of my teenage children, and that's far more robust sample than all these broadcasters, advertisers who have a vested interest in getting the best possible information they can about how many people are watching which television programmes, so every minute and every hour of the day. So I think we need to remember there is a robust way of measuring what people actually view, and all that evidence shows that linear television is still holding up very well, including among younger.
Indeed, but
young audiences.
Ben, but measuring linear television, that's the point. How do you measure where else they're watching that and other things as well?
But because they're doing other things, you shouldn't jump to the conclusion that they're not watching linear television, because they may be doing both. They may be watching linear television and they're watching YouTube and they're watching something
Ben, do you want to come back on that? You had some thoughts?
Sure. I just thought that the Barb... I mean, look, I think television in the UK is actually very robust and rosy at the moment. Audiences are up and advertising's up, which is great. But the thing I would warn about is the danger of averages. right? So there was an Enders analysis report earlier this year that looked at the 18 to 34-year-old audience, and there's 12% of them, 12.5% of them that have been lost to linear television in the last 3 years. Now that's scary, because if that trend carries on, and that's with the TV measurement solution, not with the execs. If that trend carries on, that means you're not engaging with that key audience as they grow up. And I think that's something, I completely agree with what you said, Martin, but I don't think you should ignore the fact that's changing.
I mean, Mark, we've got the linear end covered, and as you're saying there quite well and thoroughly. But I mean, how do you measure? Is it anecdotally? How do you measure what the Twitter conversation is? You just see if you're managing to trend, or do you try and make it trend yourself? Or, I mean, what do you do? Is it non-scientific?
No, it's pretty scientific and it's data driven. But it's compared to a linear TV is in fine form. Scheduled TV isn't. That's the risk, and I think that you're not going to get the same numbers until the big conversation on the big channels is happening at that scale on a single digital platform. Linear TV is in great form. Scheduled TV isn't. That's the difference for me.
Okay, we've got another question there where we are 10 minutes to go.
Thank you. Dinah Kane, Creative Skills. I just wanted to come back to the future issues and the point that's being made about the need to have quality content that's available across all sorts of forms and efficiencies. So there's a tendency in this country that whenever anybody talks about efficiencies, it leads to cutting budgets for skills training and the development of people. We just look at the freezing of the BBC licence fee, 30% cut in their training budget at the moment. So I was very interested to hear you talking about the importance of skills as part of a more efficient production process and about investing in it for the future. And I'd just like to hear a bit more about that, but also responses from other people.
Well, I want to hear more from Sharon in a moment, but I want Ed Vasey to come on that, because of course, skills training. It's a mantra we hear in just about every industry. I mean, are you concerned that the television industry has cut back too far?
No, I mean, I think Dinah in Creative Skills Set have done an amazing job working with David Abrahams to put together with government, Department of Business, a huge training program involving something like 400 media companies. So it is incredibly important, the training element, and we set up other different skills funds where we were bringing in the games tax credit and so on. We set up a separate skills investment fund for people to train in virtual graphics and things like that. So we're very conscious of the need to invest in skills. We're also, as a government, taking a bigger picture, very enthusiastic about apprenticeships. Vince Cable, Matt Hancock, who was the skills minister, were big pushers of apprenticeships, which I think are also very suitable for this industry. So Dinah's absolutely right. We can't lose sight of skills, and it's important that government and industry partner together to make sure that skills are very much at the forefront of people's thinking.
And I would like to add in here, 3 years ago, Discovery produced no programming in the UK. And this year, I think we produced 1,100 hours, something like that. And that was without any help from the government, without any help from anyone. And because the creative community here and the ideas that come out are very vibrant. And we create programming now that plays all over the world. And we work with 70 production companies. So for these production companies, all of a sudden to have a new player in town that has a reasonable amount of money to invest in programming creates jobs without anybody's help.
But what about skills? What about skills and training?
Well, we train them.
I mean,
we have to train them because most of the people don't have anything. And we have internship programs and various things that we do to encourage this and because it's worth spending money on training people, and it's because they become loyal to you. And so when they get their first idea, they're going to come to Discovery instead of going to, History or Lifetime or something else.
Well, I mean, you're nodding along, but the point was that, if you're going to run so lean, the short-sighted managers are going to say, well, look, we're dealing with today. Forget about tomorrow, and bang goes the training budget.
My point was more about the industry as opposed to government, actually. And Ed just explained a lot about the incentives government's putting in. My point was about the industry. Great practice from some companies, interested in your comment about what you're observing and seeing elsewhere.
So what I would say in the future, and I know we're running out of time, but just one really specific example. We've been talking a lot about data. So there's an example of before, people didn't quite know what to do with the data, and that's a great example of invest in the training so people understand what the data is going to give to you, what does it tell you about consumption habits, what does it tell you about behaviors, what does it drive for you as an organization around revenue streams and potential revenue streams. But you're absolutely right. The first knee-jerk reaction is to cut training, and that's absolutely the place that you should not be cutting, and you should be investing in training and trying to actually invest in retaining your people who actually understand the industry and the business, but build new skills around things like data analytics that could be hugely instrumental in your direction.
Okay, sorry, do you want to come back on that? No, okay. Well, I've got another question there, but I mean, it sounds to me like YouTube should be putting a bit of money into training, or you just leave them in their bedrooms and they'll find out somehow.
No, we have the Online Creator Academy. We have a space in London, I think in the last years, had 2,400 people come through it for learning how to use. We invested in a studio, including a green screen, 2 green screen rooms. We've got a full 8 edit suites that people can come in to use. All of our interest is totally aligned with getting as many people skilled up so they can create great content.
And it's back to the point we were making about the better it looks, then obviously more people are going to watch it. Can indies afford it? Can you afford
we
training?
don't like that. That's a pain, because they're not paying us to make it for them because they're doing it themselves. But that's the way it is. That's why you innovate around other areas.
Okay, I think we might have one last question from the front here.
Thank you. My name is Julie Craig. I run Tayscreen, one of the UK screen commissions in Scotland. I'm particularly interested in, given that analytics is a great indicator for revenues, for example, do you think there's enough transparency about the information? I mean, on financial markets, for example, there'll be information on volumes of trading, prices paid, what's trading, and so on. It strikes me that the analytics for broadcast production and so on tends to be on how much you can afford to buy. And that obviously there's a bunch of companies out there just simply don't have access to the data and certainly don't necessarily have the skills to make sense, through the analytics or any other technique.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, are there restrictions on it, or knowledge is power? I mean, there are European data regulations, aren't there, and all kinds that are affecting YouTube.
We don't share personal data, but anybody, either of these guys who've got channels, will get viewing data. They will get ad revenue data broken down by territory. They'll get, because we've got at the moment something like 8 or 9 different ad formats. They'll see day by day what the CPM that they're getting for each of those ad formats is in whichever countries, which is usually, if they've left it open, will be all the countries that we're live in, so 191 different countries. And they'll see what the ad rates are on those formats. So
and with due respect, they will, but what about indies, all of the indies out there who are not necessarily
all of the indies, a lot of the indies are our
Sorry.
partners. I'd love them all to be, and then they'd all have. I mean, and we're working actively with PACT. Actually, going back to the training point, we're working actively with PACT as well. We've got a couple of courses coming up in terms of in the next month, so it's specifically designed for indies.
Listen, I want to wind this up because I want to continue the conversation in the bar. Okay, really, if it's a really quick point, I want to get a head start on the free hooch. We've got 2 minutes.
Okay, quick question about content. How is the rise of YouTube going to affect the kind of content that linear TV makes, given that people are now watching clips that might last 20 seconds as opposed to an hour-long Discovery doc?
Okay, 30 seconds. We'll start with Lee.
I think they're complementary. You might have the attention span of a gnat one day and decide that you want to watch 10 programs that are 3 minutes each. On the other hand, you may want to binge view and watch 16 episodes of an hour drama. I don't think that, I just think it depends very much on, on the consumer.
Yeah, and I just want to say that there's a lot of long-form content. There's a lot of original long-form content being produced for YouTube every day. There's a piece from Vice News, and if you only take away one thing about YouTube, go and look at Vice News. Yeah. They produced a piece on the Islamic State last week. They uploaded a five-part. Any of the news or factual producers would be here to see it.
Definitive insight, as close as you're ever going to get to them. Yeah, I mean,
12.5 million views.
You could start. There's another conversation.
But I mean, there's also, I think, it's still, although we've been talking about the changing, there's still a hierarchy where I think a lot of people who have programs on YouTube want to be on broadcasters. So that presumably YouTube is a great way for people to find new talent. I mean, Zoe's show, I'm sure, is going to go live on BBC Two in the next year.
Yeah, yeah. Ben smiling very nice. You had a very quick point to make, I think. Just shout it out if the mic doesn't get to you.
Sorry, I'm John McVeigh from PACT. I've been coming here for nearly 20 years.
No way.
More than 20 years.
God, since you were 6.
Straight from school. You've been coming here since you were at school.
I've been coming here when you were still at school. Except we probably went to different schools.
You went to a really posh one, didn't you?
No, I just want to say this is great. I've heard all this regurgitated in many, many shapes and forms. I don't think there's one right or wrong answer. But let's just bear in mind, all of us who actually work in television, it's a $400 billion industry globally now. The UK is well placed in that. And it's worth more than the combined publishing, film and music industries put together. It's a really good future wherever you come from.
You've done my job for me. You wound it up. What a nice note that is. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, well done you. Listen, well, I do, and thank you very much for that. I do want another round of applause, please, for our panellists who've shared their expertise. So we won't name them. You know who they are, all of them.